3 hours after my father was buried, Denise dragged his notebooks to the curb. She did it in her church dress. She did it while relatives still held paper plates. She did it while rain started tapping the maple leaves. Brooke stood beside her with her phone raised. She smiled like this was cleanup. Not grief. Cleanup. In front of everyone. No one stopped them. My aunt looked down. The pastor pressed his lips together. Our next-door neighbor carried pie back to her car. Everybody watched the boxes split open in the rain. I lived in the attic. I was still wearing black. Denise pointed at the front steps and told me my room needed to be empty by morning. Brooke laughed and said old paper smelled like mildew and failure. Then one wet notebook slid across the sidewalk. A page opened flat under the streetlight. Only 2 words sat in the center. Elias Wren. Denise froze for one clean second. Then she bent down and picked up only that notebook. Not the others. Only that one. That was the moment the air changed. They were not throwing away my father's scraps anymore. They had found something worth hiding. I did not chase her down the driveway. I did not ask what the name meant. I just stood there in the rain and watched Denise carry that notebook inside like it had started breathing. 5 minutes earlier those pages were trash. Now the front door locked behind them. Now Brooke stopped laughing. Now both of them were speaking too low for the sidewalk to hear. That name changed the temperature of the house. I knew it before I knew why. My father had always written in layers. Draft over draft. Name over name. He crossed things out hard, but never without reason. If he left 2 words alone in the center of a page, they mattered. I gathered the other notebooks before the rain ruined them. My hands shook once, then stopped. From the kitchen window, Denise watched me like I was no longer pathetic. That was new. People do not look at useless girls that way. They look at witnesses that way. And I knew they were afraid now. Before I tell you what Elias Wren meant, do me one favor. Like this story. Subscribe if family betrayal stories keep you up at night. And tell me where you are watching from. Then come back with me to the attic, because that is where my father started speaking again. My name is Nora Vale. I am 29 years old. I live in Mount Airy, Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. I work as a copy editor for a university press. And right now, I am telling you this because the woman who threw my father's pages into the rain tried to profit from his name before she understood what he had left behind. I was his daughter from the first marriage. That detail always arrived in the room before I did. Denise never had to say it twice. Brooke never had to say it at all. In that house, I was the leftover shape from another life. My father never called me that. He gave me the attic because it was quiet. He said old houses had one honest room. Ours was under the roof, beside the chimney, where the winter pipes clicked at night and the floor sloped half an inch toward the east wall. He wrote downstairs. I sorted pages upstairs. That was our system. After the funeral, people mistook my silence for weakness. That happens to women in families like mine. They think if you do not fight for the table, you will not fight for the truth. They were wrong. I was not grieving yet. I was taking inventory. Denise preferred clean surfaces and simple stories. Brooke preferred cameras, labels, and whatever sounded expensive that week. They both liked speaking before facts had time to sit down. I did not. I listened longer. I kept more. I learned early that people who control the tone of a room often panic when someone controls the paper. That was the difference between us. Denise knew how to host grief. She knew casseroles, folded napkins, and low church voices. Brooke knew how to turn contempt into charm before company noticed. I knew my father's handwriting at a glance, even when he changed ink, angle, or mood. I knew when a crossed outline was dead and when it was only hiding. So when Denise lifted that wet notebook and locked it inside, I knew something had shifted. She thought she had found money. I thought she had touched structure. The attic smelled like pencil dust, old paper, and radiator heat. It was the only part of the house Denise never cared to stage. No framed family photos. No polished bowls. No candles pretending everything was softer than it was. Just boxes. Blue binders. Rubber bands gone brittle with age. Stacks of yellow legal pads with my father's narrow slanted handwriting pressing through 3 pages at once. He wrote with black coffee beside his elbow and a blue Dixon Ticonderoga sharpened to a point so fine it looked surgical. He erased hard. He circled harder. When a sentence mattered, he boxed it. When a name mattered, he left space around it like he wanted air touching it. That night, I carried the wet notebooks upstairs and laid them open across the floorboards. The rain had blurred some margins, but not the center lines. Not the names. Not the parts he wanted to survive. From the hall below, I heard cabinet doors opening and closing. Not frantic. Measured. Denise was not searching the house like a woman in grief. She was sorting it like inventory. Brooke moved faster. Her heels clicked from the study to the dining room and back again. Twice I heard the deadbolt on my father's office door. By midnight, the brass knob was gone. A keypad lock sat there by morning. That was the first object I could not ignore. The second was a black document box. I saw Brooke carry it out of the study with both hands. Not because it was heavy, because she did not trust herself to drop it. She set it on the dining room table like it belonged to a bank, not a family. Denise covered it with one of the funeral flower cloths when she heard me on the stairs. The third was smaller. A single page tucked inside one damp notebook. No title. No date. Just one line in my father's hand. Not everything I write belongs to the house. I read it twice. Then a third time slower. He had said something close to that once, years earlier, when I asked why he kept old drafts no one would read. I thought he meant memory. Or pride. Or maybe habit. I was wrong. My father did not keep paper for comfort. He kept it because writing left tracks. And tracks mattered when people started lying. Once, when he saw me filing contracts for the press, he said if paper ever starts moving faster than truth, call Amelia Cross. Outside. Tires hissed over wet asphalt. Inside, the house had gone too quiet. Not sad. Controlled. Denise thought locks made her look organized. Brooke thought carrying that box made her look important. I looked at the line. Then I understood the room was no longer full of leftovers. It was full of evidence. I waited until Denise and Brooke left the house with churchwomen and their grief voices. Then I carried the wet notebook to the attic window and set it beneath the gray light. The page opened to 2 words. Elias Wren. No title. No chapter. No explanation. Just the name sitting in the center like my father had cleared space around it on purpose. I knew the name. Not from gossip. From work. At the press, people talked about books like carpenters talk about wood. Plainly. With respect for what held weight. Elias Wren was one of those names. No photos. No tours. No public life. Just novels that kept selling and a silence big enough to keep people curious. My mouth went dry. I pulled my laptop from under the bed and searched the trade sites first. Not blogs. Not readers arguing in comment sections. Trade sites. By the third result, the room had gone colder. Mercer House had announced that it had acquired a final unpublished manuscript by Elias Wren. There was a photo of Denise outside a Manhattan office. Brooke stood beside her in sunglasses, holding the black document box like she belonged there. That was when the timeline corrected itself. Denise had not discovered everything at the curb. She had been inside my father's papers before the funeral flowers were dry. The curb was not the beginning. It was the first moment she realized I had seen enough to matter. Then I saw the quote. Denise called herself the sole literary heir. She said the manuscript had been found among her late husband's papers. She said the family was honored. She said release plans were already underway for the holiday list. Already underway. Nothing moved that fast by accident. Editors did not wire advances and schedule announcements because a widow found a wet notebook after a burial. The lock on the study. The lowered voices. The black box under the funeral cloth. Those had started before the rain. Then I saw the number. The advance was high enough to explain the keypad, the softened voices, and the way Denise had begun treating paper like inventory. Not memory. Inventory. That was the first payoff. The notebooks were not sentimental leftovers. They were money to her. Maybe prestige too. But money first. I kept reading until one phrase stopped me harder than the rest. Sole literary heir. Not widow. Not representative. Not executor. Heir. That was the word she had reached for. And the second I saw it, I knew she was using language she did not fully understand. Not yet. Denise called me downstairs at noon. The dining room still smelled like funeral lilies and stale coffee. Brooke sat at the table with her legs crossed, scrolling through comments under the trade announcement like strangers had been invited into the house before me. A folder waited in front of my chair. Denise touched it with 2 fingers. Sign this, Nora. I stayed standing. What is it? Housekeeping. A clean acknowledgement so there is no confusion later. Brooke looked up and smiled. You do not need to make everything dramatic. I opened the folder. Estate acknowledgement and release. 3 pages. Then 5 more behind it. I flipped slowly. Personal property. Unpublished materials. Notes, drafts, memoranda. Any present or future claim. Denise exhaled through her nose like I was delaying something elegant. It is simple. I looked at the last page. My name was already typed beneath a signature line. If it is simple, read the copyright paragraph, I said. Brooke rolled her eyes. Oh my God. Denise did not touch the paper again. She leaned back instead. Probate covers the house, the contents, the papers, all of it. We are trying to move forward with dignity. Read it, I said. Her jaw set. I am not reading all that. That was the first crack. Not loud. Not dramatic. Just clean. And I noticed. Because women who own what they are selling do not fear the paragraph. Women who understand the paper do not summarize it before anyone else can read. Brooke pushed the folder toward me. Dad is gone. Mom is handling everything. You live upstairs rent-free, and now you want to pretend you are some kind of partner. In this. I looked at her. Not partner. Witness. That landed. I saw it in the way her fingers tightened around her phone. Denise changed tactics. This is not about money, Nora. This is about family order. The publisher wants clarity. We are protecting your father's legacy from confusion. Legacy. She used the word like she had polished it in the mirror. I tapped the second page. Then why does this release every claim tied to unpublished work, literary materials, and future proceeds? Denise went still for half a second. Then she gave me the smile she used on church women and bank managers. Because lawyers write broadly. That is what they do. No. That is what people do when they want control before questions start. Silence sat down with us. I know some of you have felt that exact table under your hands. The moment people who dismissed you suddenly need your signature. The moment grief turns into paperwork. If that has happened to you, leave me a comment below. And subscribe now, because what Denise said next told me exactly where her fear lived. What Denise said next was quiet enough that Brooke had to lean in. You are making this harder than it needs to be, she said. There is no separate literary issue. Everything came through the estate. I closed the folder and slid it back across the table. Everything came through the estate, I repeated. Yes, Denise said. House, papers, rights, authority. All of it. Brooke nodded like repetition could turn language into law. Mom already handled the publisher. They know who she is. This is done. Done. That word sat there like cheap jewelry. False. I stood up. Then you do not need my signature. Denise kept her voice smooth. Nora, do not be childish. The publisher wants clarity. Families sign things after a death. That is normal. Normal for whom, I asked. Brooke made a small sound through her nose. For people who are not trying to turn grief into a hobby. I looked at Denise again. If everything is so clear, why are you rushing? Because release schedules are built months ahead, she said. Because adults handle timing. Because your father would have wanted order. Order. Family. Legacy. Clarity. Those were her favorite words when she wanted control without admitting it. I took the wet notebook back upstairs and locked the attic door with the old hook. Then I sat on the floor and made 3 piles. What I knew. What Denise had said. What she had refused to read. The second pile mattered most. Everything came through the estate. She kept saying it because she needed it to be true. That told me where to press. By evening the story had started moving through the neighborhood. I saw it first in a text from my aunt. Denise says you are struggling and lashing out. Please do not make this uglier for yourself. Another came from a woman at church. Your father would want peace. Brooke had been busy. She never posted anything direct. She was smarter than that. Instead, she uploaded filtered photos of the study with captions about protecting private family work. Then one from a coffee shop in Center City with a stack of marked pages and the words doing the hard part no one sees. Then a black screen with one sentence. Some people mistake proximity for ownership. That was layer 1. Social control. They wanted the neighborhood version first. The harmless public version where I was unstable, ungrateful, maybe jealous, and definitely inconvenient. I saved screenshots. I noted timestamps. I wrote down every phrase Denise repeated. Family order. Private estate. Sole literary heir. Everything came through the estate. When people lie in public, they usually build a trail for you. You just have to stop talking long enough to let them finish. 2 days later, Mercer House called. The email was polished enough to sound expensive. They appreciated the difficulty of loss. They were aware of heightened emotions after a death. They wanted a brief family meeting to eliminate misunderstandings before the formal publicity schedule began. The meeting was set for Thursday afternoon in a hotel suite off Rittenhouse Square. Denise wore cream again. Brooke wore a camel coat and carried the black document box. I wore navy and brought one notebook in my tote, the one with Elias Wren on the wet page. A publicist with perfect posture shook my hand. At the far end sat a woman from in-house counsel with a legal pad and the calm face of someone who had already read too many contracts that week. Denise started before anyone asked her to. "This is a simple family matter," she said. "My late husband was a private man. I am the widow. Our daughter and I have handled his papers. Nora is grieving and confused by old drafts." Old drafts. That was how she shrank the room. By making value sound embarrassing. Counsel clicked her pen. "Mrs. Mercer, for our file, can you walk us through the chain of title for the manuscript and any related rights material?" Denise smiled. "Of course. Everything came through probate. My husband passed. His papers remained in the residence. As spouse, I assumed responsibility for the estate and literary property." Counsel asked again. "Do you have any prior assignment documents, trust transfers, agency agreements, reserved rights schedules, or letters of direction tied to unpublished work?" Denise answered too fast. "No." Brooke added, "We would have seen them." I opened my notebook and wrote that down. Counsel turned to me. "Ms. Vale, is there something specific you want the House to know?" I kept my voice level. "I want the representation language read carefully before anyone calls this clean." Denise exhaled. "This is exactly what I meant. Drama. Suspicion. She lived in the attic and sorted papers. That does not make her an owner." I looked at counsel. "Did she provide a recorded assignment?" The pen stopped moving. Counsel leaned back. "A recorded assignment of what, specifically?" I closed the notebook. "That depends on what exactly she told you she owned." Denise cut in. "This is ridiculous. He was my husband. The papers were in my house. The manuscript was in my house. There. Not rights. Not title. Not authority. House. Possession is the word people reach for when ownership starts slipping away." Counsel wrote something down. Then she asked Denise to identify the specific basis for sole literary heir as used in the announcement. Denise said probate again. She said widow. She said residence. She said discovered among personal effects. She never said assignment. She never said chain of title. She never said copyright. I asked one more question. Was there a schedule of rights attached to the agreement? Denise snapped toward me. "I am not reading every page of a standard contract in front of strangers." Counsel answered before I could. "You already signed it, Mrs. Mercer. Reading is usually the less painful part." Not toward me. Toward structure. The publicist asked if the release date was still safe. The editor asked whether any other manuscripts might exist. Counsel asked for copies of all source documents, including probate filings, testamentary materials, prior agent correspondence, and a complete inventory of papers removed from the residence after death. Denise adjusted one cuff 3 times. "This has already been handled," she said. "We are preparing for launch. We have cover proofs. We have catalog placement. We have pre-orders. Counsel did not blink. Then you will want this resolved correctly. After the meeting, Brooke cornered me by the hotel elevators. What are you doing? Breathing, I said. You think because you read books for a living you can embarrass us in front of publishers. No. I think your mother keeps using the word estate because she does not know the right one. Brooke stared at me. Then she laughed once. You are going to lose this house and still act smug. They still thought I wanted the house. Good. By Monday, the pressure changed shape. Denise sent me a formal email with subject line request for immediate cooperation. Attached was a new version of the release. Longer. Cleaner. Meaner. Now the language included waiver of claims tied to literary assets, publication proceeds, licensing revenue, adaptation income, and any future exploitation of materials discovered in the residence of the decedent. She had learned new vocabulary over the weekend. Not understanding. Vocabulary. She still was not reading what she signed. She was just repeating bigger words and hoping they would hold. I printed the email and folded it into the notebook. Then I called the one person my father had once told me to call if paper ever started moving faster than truth. When she answered, I only said this. She sold something. And now they are teaching her bigger words for it. The woman my father told me to call was Amelia Cross. She had handled contracts for 2 university authors years earlier, and my father trusted her for one reason. Amelia did not react to volume. She reacted to paper. I met her the next morning in a narrow office above Walnut Street. I brought the wet notebook, the new release Denise emailed, screenshots of Brooke's posts, and every sentence Denise had repeated like it could save her. Amelia read for 15 minutes without moving her face. Then she asked one question. Did your father ever separate the house from the work? Yes, I said. He used to say not everything he wrote belonged to the house. She nodded once. Then she opened the portfolio she had brought and turned it toward me. Inside were 3 documents. A certificate of trust, a copyright assignment signed 4 years earlier, and a private letter naming me successor literary manager if my father died or became unable to act. I did not smile. I did not cry. I just looked at the signatures and felt the room settle into place. He knew, Amelia said. Maybe not this exact sequence, but he knew enough to build structure. The launch event was set for Friday evening at a ballroom near Logan Square. Mercer House had printed banners, mailed invitations, and stacked advance copies near the stage. Reviewers were there. Regional media were there. So were donors, bookstore people, and 3 women from church who still thought Denise was protecting culture. Denise wore midnight blue. Brooke wore white and gold. Amelia and I arrived early and sat in the second row. Denise spotted us before the event began. Her expression hardened, then softened again for the room. She walked over with that same polished church voice. Nora, I really hoped you were done making scenes. I stayed seated. Then you should not have invited a room full of witnesses. Brooke gave a short laugh. You still think you can stop this? No, Amelia said. We think your mother can. When the editor stepped to the microphone, Amelia stood and handed a sealed packet to Mercer House's general counsel. I watched his eyes move over the first page, then the second, then the assignment. His shoulders changed first, then his mouth. He turned to Denise. Mrs. Mercer, before we proceed, I need clarification on your authority representations. Denise smiled toward the room. Of course. No, he said. I need you to answer carefully. The ballroom shifted. Not loudly. Just enough. He held up the agreement she had signed. This contract states that you are sole owner of the literary rights, that no prior assignment, trust transfer, or conflicting claim exists, and that you have full authority to convey publication rights. Denise lifted her chin. That is correct. Counsel placed Amelia's documents on the table beside the stage. Then please explain the June Lantern Literary Trust, the recorded copyright assignment into that trust, and the direction naming Nora Vale successor literary manager. For 1 second, Denise still believed tone could save her. She looked at the audience instead of the paper. This is a family misunderstanding, she said. My husband is gone. My daughter and I found the material in our home. Counsel did not move. Mrs. Mercer, I need you to confirm this paragraph sentence by sentence. He placed the agreement flat on the table between them. Amelia said nothing. She did not need to. Denise looked down at the agreement. Counsel read the first representation aloud and asked if she stood by it. She said yes. He read the second. Her pause came there. By the third, the room no longer needed an explanation. No prior assignment. No trust transfer. No conflicting right holder. Each sentence closed one more door. Brooke stepped forward. This is insane. She lived in the attic. She sorted paper. That does not mean she owns anything. I stood then. You're right, I said. Sorting paper is not ownership. Signing what you never owned is. The counsel turned to the editor. Stop the stream. Hold distribution. No copies leave the warehouse. Nobody argued. Even Brooke stayed still, phone lowered, like silence had finally found her. That was the part Denise never understood. Power sounds permanent until paper speaks. She looked at me then, really looked. Like I was the point where her story stopped moving. I kept my voice flat. I am not fighting you for the house. I am removing your hands from my father's name. No one clapped. This was not that kind of room. The editor stepped away from the microphone. The publicist started collecting advance copies from the display table. And Denise finally looked down at the page she should have read the first time. By 9 the next morning, Mercer House had frozen the release. Not paused. Not delayed. Frozen. The livestream never went back up. Review copies were recalled from regional outlets. Pallets already routed through New Jersey stayed in the warehouse under hold tags. The launch banners came down before breakfast. By noon, the industry sites had changed their language from anticipated posthumous release to rights dispute under review. That was the public version. The real collapse happened in quieter rooms. Mercer House sent Denise a formal notice of breach before the weekend ended. Amelia showed me the first page. False authority. Faulty warranties. Indemnity exposure. Immediate demand for return of the advance and reimbursement tied to printing, freight, event costs, and legal review. No dramatic language. Just numbers, obligations, and deadlines. Brooke moved out of her rented condo 10 days later. Denise sold jewelry first. Then the car she bought after signing the deal. Then furniture she had insisted was too refined for the house my father paid for. None of it touched the real problem. Because this was never only about the advance. It was about the paper trail she built while trying to turn possession into ownership. Civil counsel for Mercer House filed first. After that came document requests, sworn statements, and a referral packet Amelia said would move where it needed to move. She did not oversell it. She did not promise handcuffs or easy endings. She just said structured lies leave structured damage, and structured damage tends to travel. I believed her. People from church stopped texting me about peace. They had seen enough. My aunt called once and cried without quite apologizing. The pastor mailed a short note on cream stationery. He wrote that silence in a room can mean many things, and he wished he had understood mine sooner. I did not answer anyone right away. For the first time since the funeral, the house sounded smaller than the attic had ever sounded before. Instead, Amelia and I went back to the attic. We wore gloves. We opened every box. We dried what could be saved. We logged dates, drafts, pseudonym references, editorial marks, and correspondence. My father had left more than one manuscript. Not finished books. Not miracle treasures. Fragments. Notes. Alternate openings. One folder labeled not for release. Another labeled hold until clean chain confirmed. Even then, he was thinking in systems. That was the part one could not forgive. He knew enough to protect the work. He knew enough to leave me structure. He just did not live long enough to explain where every door led. I never fought Denise for the house. People expected that. They wanted one last family courtroom in the driveway. One last screaming match. One last cheap ending. I did not give them that. I took the literary archive, the trust records, the assignment history, and the only thing I had wanted from the start. My father's actual name. Not the legal one on tax forms. The real one. The one he built in the dark and hid in plain sight. Months later, Mercer House approached through new counsel. Different tone. Different paper. They wanted to discuss a lawful addition managed through the trust, with accurate attribution, a corrected rights schedule, and my approval at every stage. This time they read every paragraph. So did I. Rage burns fast. Boundaries last longer. That is what I learned. Blood does not create ownership. Proximity does not create authorship. And grief is not permission. I did not destroy Denise. I did not need to. She did that the moment she signed a page she would not read. Now I have a question for you. If the people who pushed you out suddenly discovered that your silence was worth money, would you warn them first or let the paper answer for you? Tell me in the comments. I read every one.